automotive really seems to have stolen the show here a bit. We're in front of the NVIDIA booth. They have a partnership with Audi. There's a whole bunch of other stuff going on, partnerships with Google, all kinds of consumer electronics colliding with the automotive world. What's going on there, and why is there such a big noise here?
Well, if you look at the spend in automotive electronics, this year it's going to be about $180 billion, which is up, kind of 11-12% a year. That number is exclusive of, the infotainment space. Infotainment space this year is about $35 billion, expected to grow in the, kind of mid double digits. It's a massive market. About 80 million cars sold last year. So the average electronics content in a car is now up to about $2,700.
Wow.
And, it wasn't too many years ago when it was about $1,500. So, and they're just scratching the surface. My wife just bought a new Lexus. It's got that, it tells you if someone's crossing behind you, it'll automatically brake for you. There's just so much more functionality and so much more user experience. And it used to be electronics was, about the engine controls and some basic user experience. I got to turn the air conditioning up and stuff. And I think they're just absolutely scratching the surface of what they can do inside a car.
So you talk about that $2,700 per car as an average. How much further do you think that can go? Because it feels it's still got a long way to go. We're talking about piloted and driverless. Everybody says it's on the way. Everybody says it's definitely going to happen. It's a ways off, so there's more money to come there.
Yeah, I wish I knew that number. I bet there are a lot of people in this show trying to figure out what that number is. As the user experience goes up and as electronics get more intense, that's offset a little bit by the fact that most of these electronics get cheaper over time. So, does a 20% increase in functionality add 20% electronics cost? Probably not. And it depends over what duration. Maybe it adds 5 or 6. Is it going to be $4,000 per car in 6 or 7 years? Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm sure some of the cars I've seen here on the show floor, have got upwards of 7,000 or 8,000 in them today. It's just amazing what they're doing with some of this stuff.
Yeah, and the Tesla with a 20-inch screen, I think, in there. That's amazing. I want to talk a little bit about the supply chain for the automotive industry, because it does seem that the supply chain for consumer electronics and the supply chain for automotive are very, very different. They need to merge in some way. What do you see happening there? Different design cycles, different reliability requirements. How can they mash together in a way that's successful?
Well, I think there's going to be some big intermediaries, probably some of the EMS providers that understand the quality requirements, that have the various TS certifications and things like that. You see a lot more startups, and when I say startups, 4 or 5 people companies in the consumer space, because it is a different supply chain. It's a very robust supply chain, and at the same time, the reliability requirements are probably not quite so stringent, right? If you need to take a device back to the store or ship it back to Amazon, nobody likes it. It's a drag. It's not a catastrophe. But if you got to wheel your $75,000 Lexus back to the dealership because you have a flex circuit out, that's really, really expensive. It's expensive in terms of reputation. It's expensive in terms of the user experience. So I think there are going to be a big push from the automakers to take some of these small guys, some of these innovative guys, and push them into bigger players in the supply chain, where that means consolidation, whether it means outsourcing to specialized firms that are really good in the automotive space. But it's probably not going to become as fragmented as the consumer space. It's going to be driven by the end, the end user, the big OEMs, the GMs, the Volvos, the Audis, the Nissans of the world. I think they're going to drive it into a supply chain that they're comfortable with, which is larger players doing more activity.
Okay, and if we look specifically at the outsourcing side of it, the automotive industry has traditionally been quite conservative. They have their own OEMs, their own OEM suppliers around them, ODM suppliers, people like Bosch or Continental that supply product to them. But we're seeing more of what we consider to be the traditional EMS companies try to enter that space. Do they have a benefit in that space because of the experience they have in flat panels, in consumer electronics, in cell phones, in those issues, as well as being able to provide lighting and all that stuff that requires the automotive certification?
I think they have some benefits, and probably more importantly, some perceived benefits that the automotive OEMs have got to go sort out. But to get into that space, the big car companies have used their next tier of suppliers to do so much of the design work, so much of the interior design work, the electronics, things like that. And so there isn't really a lot of outsourcing to be done where Saab calls you up and says, build my module exactly like this. So the EMS companies are going to have to get a little bit more into the design. They're going to have to get in bed with these suppliers earlier. I think the car companies will perceive that as a good thing because they think these companies are very quick moving and it will help them become more quick moving. But I think there is, to some extent, a reason why some of the automotive companies move at a particular pace. It's part of how they get that level of reliability. It's part of the fact that they are selling, higher value, lower quantity. The user experience is really important, and so I think there's going to be some learning on both sides there.
Yeah, we certainly don't want to see the automotive industry end up with the same margins as the EMS industry.
I don't think we want to see any industries end up with the same margin as the EMS industry.
Yeah, that would be a big challenge. Lastly, lots of cool products: laser lights, parking, remote parking on your iPhone, driverless, piloted, all those kind of things. Which one do you want for your car?
Oh, that's a tough one. I would love the driverless option. I've got a fairly big commute, and if I could sit there in the passenger seat and hook up to my my Wi-Fi hotspot and work all the way to work, that'd be a beautiful thing.